name's Colonel David Kretz. I'm in the United States Air Force. Been a part of the Air Force for almost 35 years now. I thought it would be a good opportunity to get my educational benefits at the time. The economy was a lot different then, in the early 80s when I first, mid-80s when I came in the Air Force, and good paying jobs were hard to come by. And I knew I wanted my education, and it presented a good opportunity for me.
So was there any sports or anything you learned at USV that kind of prepared you for the military?
I think that's probably one of the best things that prepared me for the military. I'd say two-a-days in football, teamwork, camaraderie, trust, loyalty, committed to a team cause or to a purpose. I played football, basketball, baseball, all at Upper Scioto Valley. Had some great coaches, great people that I played with, other students that I was affiliated with there, and it was a great opportunity for me as a young person. I was a student that had a lot of potential, but having a lot of potential, that means you haven't actualized it yet. So I had a lot of potential, but let's just say I fell short of, I was always a fairly intelligent person, but I didn't really apply myself as well as I could have in school, which probably would have led to more opportunities for me along the way. But I did learn a lot about work ethic, how to apply yourself, those types of things. So if I would give anyone a bit of advice, whether you go in the military or whatever vocation you choose or whatever you want to do after high school, the most important thing is you wake up every day and you ask yourself, what's the next thing I can do today? And you know, life's not always about having the far end goal where I want to be somewhere out here. The only way you get there is to make the next best decision that day. And maybe you have a goal for the day, and you have a goal, something you want to accomplish that week, or something you want to accomplish by the end of the school year. But do the next best thing that you can do. I mean, life's journey's full of a million steps. Just take the next step every day. When I came in the Air Force in 1985, I enlisted in fall of 1984. At that time, it was the Cold War. You know, not direct confrontation with the Soviets, but it was a nuclear arms race. It was a different time. But since 1988, Desert Shield, Desert Storm, those conflicts started. Since then, our nation has actually been at war for almost, well, right at 30 continuous years now. Everything from Operation Iraqi Freedom, Operation Enduring Freedom, Desert Shield, Desert Storm, Kosovo, Bosnia. I mean, we've been engaged in conflicts around the world. Like I've deployed in support of Operation Enduring Freedom, deployed right after 9/11 when we were doing combat air missions, CAS missions. It's really not the right terminology for it, but we did a lot of flights over major cities, and that was all ran out of 1st Air Force at Tyndall Air Force Base. So I was sent there to help with support operations there. Post 9/11 right away. I did that. I've deployed to the Middle East in support of Operation Enduring Freedom. Always a support officer, a support role for that. So I've been a squadron commander deployed, support officer deployed. So never in direct combat. But I would say I've lived in a lot of different places. I've been to, I think, about 34 different countries. I've been stationed in several different countries, including England and Italy, but I think my favorite was actually South Korea. And the reason for that is simply there weren't that many people that had their families with them. We're 48 miles from the DMZ and the North Koreans. It was a tight community. The kids were all friends with each other. People I worked with were all close-knit. And then the Koreans, the locals that were there as well, that worked within the squadron that I worked in. Great folks, made lifelong friendships both in the military and with some of the Koreans there. Probably the most honorable job I've ever had was working at Dover at the port mortuary. And it was a difficult time. I was in Air War College at the time when I got my notification of the assignment where I was going, and you see your organization on 60 Minutes, and you know there's a reason you're being brought in there. But when I got there, it was probably one of the most sacred missions I've ever been a part of, bringing fallen service members back home to American soil, helping their families make arrangements. We were also part of repatriating remains from past conflicts, Vietnam and the Korean War, and I've done escort duty for that as well, bringing a fallen service member home back to Oklahoma from Vietnam, and just a lot of great opportunities there, but probably, you know, one of the most emotionally challenging jobs I've ever had. The events when I was stationed in Guam, that was probably the hardest I've ever worked in my life, without a doubt. It was literally 7 days a week for months on end, part days maybe, some days on the weekend. But there were a lot of issues that occurred when we were there. We had a Korean airliner, 747, that crashed on the island. We happened to have the only search and recovery capability on the island because we train for aircraft disasters. It's one of my jobs that I've had through my whole career is an ancillary and additional duty job is you serve as a mortuary officer in my career field. And so part of that is search and recovery of remains, transporting remains, all those types of things. So 747 crashes on the side of a mountain, 231 people on board. I believe there were, I think 241. There were like 13 survivors of the crash, but the wreckage is all over the side of a mountain. It's in tall grass, poor terrain. Doing the recovery for that, it took almost 3 weeks to clear that site. We recovered remains of around 228 people, and it was emotionally taxing, it was physically taxing, but it was you know, a worthwhile job, something that was that needed to be done because we had the capability to do it there. So I was very junior at the time, and it was a lot of responsibility. So it was an opportunity, both career-wise and to provide a service to the families of those that were on the plane as well. I would say over the period of about a month, we were the evacuation point for almost 8,000 Kurdish refugees. These were folks that were supporting Americans against Saddam Hussein. We'd made a promise to them that we would take care of their families. I remember being at a holiday party in my mess dress uniform, and we got a warning order, be prepared to receive refugees. I remember going to a planning meeting in my mess dress uniform at basically 10 o'clock at night on a Saturday night. And people were like, oh no, they'll never bring them here. And I distinctly remember saying, oh, they're definitely bringing them here because you can fulfill your promise. You're actually bringing them to American soil in Guam, which is a US territory, but they're not in the main visibility of the public back in the mainland states. I told them, they're definitely coming here and we need to prepare now. And that's exactly what we did, and it's the way that it worked out. So we had several 747s that would come in around the clock. We'd bed them down. We took old base housing that was on Anderson Air Force Base at Andy South is what we called it. Rehabbed some of that housing and made it suitable to put families in, individuals in there, and we just had a continual beat of folks coming in, got them bedded down, did some education with them, English, other things like that, what they could expect in American culture, and then they were transplanted out into different cities throughout the country, given places to immigrate to. My wife Beth was like instrumental in that whole operation because we have a military mission to do, but yet there's like the humanitarian aspect of this mission. So we had volunteers, and as it turned out, my wife Beth basically did a lot to do with organizing the volunteers and then activities for families at Andy South. So she would work with the women there, show them how to run appliances, help teach them English, would take our kids down there to play with the Kurdish kids as well, and they'd play soccer, all kinds of things like that, welcome them in. So when we would do reception, Beth she had a walkie-talkie, just like the military did. She's on a military channel. And as they would receive people, she'd get them onto the right buses, direct them where to go. She's directing both the efforts of other spouses and then actually military members as well. And hey, they're coming here. And so there's a role we had to play there. But she took on a key leadership role at that time, and she did a great job with it. The one thing that I really have learned along the way, I came into the Air Force in the mid-'80s for a different reason than a lot of people have come in today. The post 9/11 world is much different than the time beforehand. So while my motives for coming into the Air Force at the time had a lot to do with how can I get a skill, and don't get me wrong, I wanted to serve, I felt patriotic, but it was more about what skills can I get, how can I be better. I had a lot of potential, but I lacked a little I would say self-discipline when it came to like the career path. So the Air Force helped me immensely with that. People that come into our Air Force post 9/11, what we saw is a steady stream of folks who came in for truly patriotic reasons. Our economy was good at the time, there were job opportunities, but I was always amazed at the caliber of person we were getting and their reasons for coming into the Air Force. I kind of grew into that along the way. These people showed up from day one, ready to serve, ready to defend our nation, and I really found that inspiring. I would say maybe another piece of advice as well, things that I've learned along the way. I have the opportunity, I put my uniform on every day. I go to work, and there are different things on the uniform. And I have a career field badge. It tells me what my vocation is in the Air Force. I have an Air Force tape that tells me what branch of service I belong to, a rank, which tells me the status I hold in the military. But the most important thing is my name, which is sewn over my uniform on the right-hand side. This is what I do, but this is who I am. And being able to, someday take this uniform off, this will all go away, but my name will always remain. And the things that you learn along the way in life, what you do is not as important as who you are.